Welcome back to my channel. This is a speculative video about the coming successor of the Leica M10R, and this is the M10R in the black paint finish, so special limited edition. And Leica will bring in the fourth quarter an update to their rangefinder camera series, and in this video I'm going to share with you my expectations and everything I believe to know about that new rangefinder camera, which will hit the market very likely in November. And now let's kick off the video. Subscribers to my channel know that I typically have good insight into the Leica portfolio and also typically get early on access to new Leica gear. Now, having said that, we are talking here about the new Leica M11, which is not yet announced, and there are lots of rumors and speculations in the web. So I thought it's time to share my own thoughts, what I believe will be parts and components and features of this new rangefinder series camera. And I will use in a vague way formulations like my educated guess is, or I firmly believe that, and so on. And then when the new camera hit the market, you can clearly do the cross comparison and check how much of what I'm going to tell you now will actually turn into reality when the new camera will see the light of the world. Talking about the basics first, the overall appearance and let's call it the character of a rangefinder camera like we know it from the M series from Leica will remain the same. So there will be an optical viewfinder, you will find focus via range finding, you will have the manual focus ring on the lenses because all the Leica M lenses of course will be compatible with the Leica M11, and you have mainly a manually operated camera with semi-automatic modes like aperture and shutter speed priority. Talking about the optical viewfinder of the new Leica M11, what I firmly believe is, and there is speculation going on in the web and I think is absolutely true, is that with the introduction of the new Leica M11, Leica will also bring a new electronic viewfinder. And this one here is the current EVF. It's the VisoFlex, and it is totally outdated in terms of technology, but also in terms of resolution. And my firm belief is that Leica will bring a new VisoFlex with an OLED technology and with a significantly boosted up resolution, like for instance we have it here in the Leica SL2 in front of me on the table. Spending one last thought on the design of the new Leica M11, what will go away, very likely, or I should say my educated guess is that it will go away, is the bottom plate of these rangefinder series cameras. And you can remove this here, and then you have access to your battery here. So this comes out here, and here you have your SD card. And that mechanism will change to what we know from the Leica Q, Leica Q2, and the Leica SL and the Leica SL2. So for instance, on the Leica Q2, we actually, if I remove for a moment the hand grip here, which is mounted at the bottom of the camera, we have here an SD card compartment, and it's only one SD card, currently empty by the way here, because the card is in the Leica Q monochrome. And here you have your battery, and if we push that handle here, it cannot drop off, but if we give it another push, it slides out gently. And that's the same mechanism on the Q2 as well as on the Leica SL2. If we do here the same, we have the battery coming out, one more push releases it, and that's basically it. And it's also the same mechanism which Hasselblad uses. So if we look here at the X1D Mark II, we just slide it, it stays in the slot, and then it slides out gently. And that is a very convenient mechanism, which I think Leica very likely will change. Well, I should say I'm almost sure that Leica will change it, and clearly it will polarize the community because a lot of people think that this bottom plate is a unique characteristical feature of Leica M series rangefinders, and there will be people out there who complain that Leica will change it. But I think from a pragmatic perspective, that's exactly what they should do. And why should they do it? Because first of all, it is the better battery mechanism like you saw it just on the Q2, SL2 and the Hasselblad camera, but it also will open up new possibilities to weather seal the camera at the bottom of the camera body. And that is something which is important because Leica M series rangefinder cameras are known to be very robust. You can shoot them under all weather conditions, but they are not officially weather sealed. And I'm not fully sure yet whether Leica will actually certify that the Leica M11 is fully weather sealed, but at least at the bottom part, this is a vulnerable let's say, entry for water and dust into the camera. And if they get this done like on the Leica Q2, for instance, where you have this mechanism and the Leica Q2 is weather sealed as well as the Leica SL2, they will remove one vulnerability of the camera to dust and splash water, at least at the bottom of the camera. Now let's move from pure design to design in combination with functionality. And I personally believe that Leica will address with the Leica M11 one complaint many professional photographers had with the smaller Leica cameras. And it's about the following. If you look at the Leica Q2, you have in the SD card compartment space for just one card. And the same applies to the Leica M10R here. So if we remove the bottom plate as we did before, there is one SD card slot, in contrast to the Leica SL2, where you actually have two SD card slots. And that is very convenient because you can assign different functionality to how these slots are operated. And one functionality I personally use very often is that I simultaneously store images I'm shooting on card number 1 as well as card number 2. And I had situations in the past where one SD card was no longer functioning when I took it out to look at my footage, and that is a disaster. So then you want to have spare copies on the second card, and I believe that Leica is addressing this finally with the Leica M11. Now the tricky question of course is, how will they achieve to solve that problem? Because in a compact camera body like we have it here on the M10R in my hands, or the Leica Q2, you don't actually have the capacity or the space for two SD card slots like you have it on the Leica SL2, where the camera body is much more voluminous and you have more space and optionality, of course. First of all, I think it's very likely that if they switch from a bottom plate design on the Leica M series cameras to a Q-type design here, that the SD card slot is sitting at the bottom, like we see it here on the Leica Q2. There is an option that it sits on the side, but I personally believe is more likely that it sits at the bottom. Second, I don't think they will provide two SD card slots, but what they very likely will do, and that's my educated guess here, they will provide nevertheless the functionality we have here as if we would have two SD card slots. And the only way to achieve this is by having one physical SD card slot in the camera where you can use an SD card of the capacity of your choice and then combining it with internal memory and internal storage. And that is something which I believe, based on educated guess of course only, is very likely to happen with the Leica M11. So we'll get internal storage, internal memory, very likely in an order of magnitude of 64 gigabyte, and the internal memory can be configured with a physical SD card slot in the same way as if you would have two SD card slots like you have it in the Leica SL2. In this way, Leica will address the complaint of many photographers to finally have the option to configure the camera in a way that your images land at the same time simultaneously in the internal memory as well as on the SD card slot, which I assume will be at the bottom of the camera body. And then you don't have to worry about a defect in a card, because if the card is defect, it will still be in the internal memory and you have your images safe and protected in the way you want to have it. Last but not least, let's talk about the sensor of the Leica M11. And that is an interesting, I think, assumption I'm making here. So let's go right into it. First of all, let's switch the camera on here. Let's remove the lens and let's have a view at the sensor. So if we go here into menu and we follow the menu structure, we come to sensor cleaning. So typically here on Leica M series cameras, the shutter is closed if you open the lens mount here. And if I now push here open shutter, so let's see here on yes, let's go here like this. Then you finally get a view at the sensor here. And the question is, what type of sensor will Leica build into the new Leica M11? And now let's basically start with what we already have. First of all, in the Leica M10R and the Leica M10 monochrome, we have 40 megapixel sensors, and the color version distinguishes itself from the mono version just by the usual Bayer filter, which I think is well known in the community. Second, on the Leica SL2 and the Leica Q2, we have 47 megapixel, and the 47 megapixel, of course, are already plenty of resolution. Now, what I believe is, despite the fact that the sensor for the M10 mono and for the M10R is still quite fresh, that Leica will come up with a new sensor. And there are two main features which I, based on educated guess, think will materialize here. First of all, Like with many other camera brands, the new Leica M11 sensor will very likely be a BSI sensor. That means backside illuminated, and is a technology which equips the sensor with better low light capacity and catches more light in low light environments. And I think I appreciate that a lot because I've shot with lots of BSI sensors in the past, and they are indeed better under low light conditions, and very likely Leica will include this for the new sensor of the Leica M11. Second, I believe that if Leica invests in a new sensor for the Leica M11, and if it will be a BSI sensor, which I firmly believe, then they will also go up in resolution beyond of what we have in the Leica SL2 and the Leica Q2. And I think a blueprint for higher resolution sensors clearly is the Sony Alpha 7R Mark IV, which has 61 megapixel, and I personally believe that the new sensor for the Leica M11 will have a resolution give or take of about 60 megapixel in order to provide more space and resolution capacity and being fit for the future. Clearly in sports and action, the trend is sometimes in the opposite direction. So whereas the Sony A7R Mark IV came much earlier than the new Sony Alpha 1, nevertheless, the resolution has been reduced on the Alpha 1 down back to 50 megapixel, in contrast to the 61 we have on the A7R Mark IV. But the Leica rangefinder cameras are not the most natural choice for sports and action, so I think Leica will tweak the resolution up to, as I said before, around 60 megapixel. I'm at the end of the video now. I think I presented everything I personally believe will materialize in the new rangefinder Leica M11. And clearly everything I said is based on my own speculation, but based on educated guessing and being very familiar with the Leica portfolio and what they typically are aiming for. And in November, latest hopefully by the end of Q4, everybody will be able to judge and compare whether my statements here, my forecasts, to some extent really became true, or if I was just speculating a little bit too heavy. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Stay safe and healthy, and of course, peace out.